Sometimes when the world holds still, you can hear them from 2 miles away. Old resonant brass, ragged horns tearing at the silence, ghostly memory. Once the trumpeter swan touched not just our folklore, but our lives. They ranged in winter as far south as the Texas coast and east into the Chesapeake. A familiar and thrilling sight, symbol of something wild we felt inside. But we needed swan's down for our pillows and powder puffs. We needed the swan's habitat for our own. Before long, the trumpeter was nearly gone. By the 1920s, some said, there were less than 100 in the world. In our time, this flock has increased to over 600. Although additional trumpeters were discovered nesting in Alaska, these 600 swans represent a small fraction of the thousands that once nested south of the Canadian border. Now, something is happening to this flock. Its numbers are diminishing once more. Survival is uncertain, and we don't know why. They called it Coulter's Hell. For millenniums here in the Yellowstone region, furnace Earth has hurled her heated waters to the surface. The thermal influence below the surface of the Earth warmed the rivers and streams, creating an ice-free winter habitat. And it was this eerie and unearthly province which probably saved the trumpeter. Here at the turn of the century, with its survival in doubt, the trumpeter found an isolated refuge free from commercial hunters. Most swan watchers agree the only trumpeters to survive outside Alaska were those that wintered in Coulter's Hell and in the solitudes to the west. There used to be a stagecoach line from Yellowstone to this place and on to where no one quite remembers. So wild and lonesome was the country of Red Rock Lakes, Montana, that it made poor living for the people who wandered here. Time tore down their houses, as did distance their dreams. But for the beleaguered trumpeter, the country offered sanctuary. And in the 1930s, a national wildlife refuge was created in this valley. At last, vital nesting habitat was protected. Here then, at Red Rock Lakes and Yellowstone National Park, the trumpeter would make its comeback. Later, it was discovered that 2 distinct flocks winter here, one which nests here and one which nests in northern Canada. Now in late October, you can hear the Canadian migrants. From the Tobali Lakes in the Yukon, Grand Prairie in Alberta, and Nahanni River in the Northwest Territories. The returning trumpeters follow the slopes of the Rockies down to the Yellowstone region. Their great wings, often 8 feet in span, carry them more than 800 miles. And in a real sense for these northern trumpeters, it's a journey home. For these are the descendants of a small flock which has always wintered here. Winter descends on the Yellowstone cold and hard. One by one, the ponds and rivers not warmed by thermal springs begin to freeze. The plants upon which the swans feed are being locked away. The intense cold seems to deplete their energy reserves. Somehow the trumpeter seems out of place. for some swans appear unable to endure the stress of their environment. The otter, of course, takes winter in stride, turning the ice and snow into a kind of playground. How totally different these two are, the otter and the swan. Yet they share the same rivers. One appears so vulnerable, and with a graceful beauty so delicate that it's almost melancholy. The other seems more a character in a comic opera. Because of their large size and their general alertness, swans are seldom attacked by predators. Yet, if a swan is weakened by disease or injury, it might well fall victim to the otter, the eagle, or the coyote. The coyote has killed this cygnet, but something else made the kill possible. And herein lies a mystery. Less than half of these Yellowstone cygnets will survive their first winter. Is it disease? Winter stress? What was the fatal problem before the coyote appeared on the scene? As winter deepens, the competition for limited food becomes more severe. Not just for the swans, but for the other wild inhabitants of this frigid land. It is a time of posturing, of threatened violence, and of theatrical displays. A time to renew the bonds that bind a mated pair. February comes. Then March. A warm wind breathes over the mountains. The bitter coldness in the air grows softer. Canadian migrants begin their long flight north, where ironically they will encounter spring weather conditions less severe than those in the Yellowstone region. Local nesters fly off to inspect nesting sites still covered by several feet of snow. From warmer climates, the many species of ducks, geese, and shorebirds return to the Yellowstone region. Each pair must establish and defend a nesting territory. Spring comes reluctantly to the Yellowstone country. Snow returns. The wind once again cuts back to the north. But there is a subtle change in the rhythm of things, a sense of urgency, for the business of raising young must begin, even in the snow. In spite of the late spring snows, geese and swans begin nesting. But the fresh snow reveals a goose nest to a marauding raven. Fortunately, these geese will nest again, for there is still plenty of time to hatch new eggs and for goslings to learn to fly. Because of the trumpeter's large size, a long time is needed for cygnets to develop into flying swans. There is not time to re-nest if the first nest fails. Perhaps for this reason, nesting sites are carefully chosen, and much effort is spent constructing a large nest, usually surrounded by water. The trumpeter is but one of the great company of players who grace this wilderness stage, each with its own role to play. Unlike the geese with their nests overflowing, the Yellowstone trumpeter population is shrinking and is now at its lowest level in 30 years. It almost seems the trumpeter is losing its place in the timeless drama of the Yellowstone, missed a cue somehow. For the theme of spring is renewal, yet fewer and fewer swans are nesting each year, and those that do are not producing enough young to replace themselves in seasons to come. The reason for this decline still remains a mystery. The air turns soft as the season changes, and there is a greening in the high country. And in the ponds and sometimes along the rivers, something beautiful and mysterious awaits the eye. Something older than our most ancient legends. A dream done in porcelain and grace, symbol of what is most serene and what is most wild in our world and in our natures. A trumpeter pair with young. Yet their presence makes the mystery of the swan's plight in the Yellowstone even deeper, for they continue to nest and produce young. The high mortality rate of the cygnets apparently affects some pairs and not others. Trumpeters are extremely protective of their nesting territory and will defend it with what would seem rather unswan-like ferocity, especially if the trespasser is another swan. Usually, vocal threats move the intruder out of the territory. But on occasion, physical contact is necessary. It is mid-July, and the otter family have left their den to share the swan's pond for a brief time. The otter is really no match for the adult swans, but the flightless cygnets are extremely vulnerable to anything attacking from below the surface of the water. In 2 months, the cygnet's small rudimentary wings will grow into 7-foot miracles of flight. But for now, they must remain close to one of the adults for protection. Swans frequently build their nests on muskrat houses. The former inhabitants are no longer welcome. They are seen as a threat to the cygnets. Muskrats are sometimes attacked and killed by the adult swans. On a fringe of the prairie far to the east, nearly 20 years ago, an effort was begun to restore the trumpeter to its historic range. A number of cygnets from Red Rock Lakes were transplanted to Minnesota's Hennepin County. Others were introduced to the South Dakota Badlands and to the Nebraska Sandhills. For 2 decades now, these swans have been cared for and observed in hopes that they would one day migrate back into the heartland of America. These flocks have flourished, but the swans have seemed reluctant to migrate, somehow resigned to a life without wandering. To the west in the Yellowstone country, summer slides by like a lazy old song. The trumpeters loaf and forage in the shallows. There's no longer doubt that some swans in the region consume lead pellets as they feed on stems and tubers from pond and stream bottoms. While there is no lead shot within Yellowstone Park itself, it is in ponds and streams nearby. Lead poisoning may cause emaciation and eventual death. And so it is ironic the trumpeter was driven to this last refuge by the shot of hunters. And now it seems that lead shot pursues the trumpeter still. Apparently, some geese are seen as a threat to the swan. It is now September in the high country where John Coulter once wandered. Once again, a sense of urgency prevails on the land. The pace of life also quickens for the swan family. The cygnets exercise their wings in a carnival of bathing and preening and splashing. Their wing muscles grow stronger. The cygnets grow fat and fully feathered. Now their cloaks are gray, But beneath their wings, splashes of white appear, and a black mottling trims their bills. Each feather is put in place. The instinct to preen is irresistible. The cygnets weigh some 20 pounds now. They have survived into their 15th week. Survived predators, parasites, disease. And yet, there is one more peril before winter comes. If they are to continue to survive, they must learn to fly before the open water freezes. Our cygnet has great difficulty taking off from ice. It must push its powerful webbed feet against the water to develop enough speed to lift its heavy body into the air. It is, in fact, a race against time. Again and again, they hurl themselves upward, scrambling, battering at the wind, seeking flight. Daily it grows colder. Time grows short. A quietness settles over the land. Then, one day, a wind wheels out of the lodgepole pines and the family begins its chaotic dash across the water. White and gray wings pound as one by one the trumpeters rise above the earth, wild and free. How these few will fare, we cannot know. The continuing survival of the Yellowstone trumpeters is a reality tinged with doubt. But now, as this brood begins its maiden flight in Coulter's Hell, far to the east, another flock of trumpeters begins a journey. Southward from Hennepin County, Minnesota, and from the Badlands of South Dakota, they finally flew. Down the Mississippi, across the prairie heartland, where trumpeters hadn't been seen for 100 years. And so, when the world holds still, you can hear them again, a few, winging towards their historic wintering range. At last you can hear them, old resonant brass, ghostly memories. The trumpeters are coming home.